from where you sit, what are the biggest unanswered questions so far about this case?
Obviously, the biggest question is what happened to Nolan Wells. I think the reason this case is
so many people out in the public asking all of these questions, but the only question that we have is what happened to our son.
CBS.
There's a phone sitting in an evidence room right now, and what is or isn't on it could change everything about this case. Nolan Wells' mother didn't just ask for it back. She went to court. She subpoenaed TikTok, Snapchat, Instagram, WhatsApp, and Life 360 because the location data on 2 different apps wasn't matching, and she wanted to know why.
The anguished parents of Nolan Wells are turning to his social media accounts, hoping they contain clues about his death, and they want the companies behind them to help, because from the moment her son's body was found in the water off the Mississippi Gulf Coast, Wells-Wonsley has raised questions about Wells' Snapchat account. And now court records show the mother is requesting messages, photos, videos, and other records from Snapchat, also Instagram, TikTok, and the family tracking app Life 360.
Then came the audio. A frantic call from that boat, recorded in real time, proving the mechanical failure actually happened, but raising a whole new set of questions about what was happening on that island in the 90 minutes before they left.
Hey, we're at the west tip of Horn, and our bilge pump stopped working. We're sinking.
This morning, more audio of the frantic call from the boat Nolan Wells was supposed to have taken to shore after celebrating July 4th with friends on a remote barrier island off the Mississippi Gulf Coast.
And what do you want to do? Do you want to be towed back?
I want to get this boat unsank and towed back, yes.
The caller told the dispatch.
And then the independent autopsy came back. And it didn't say drowning. It didn't say homicide. It said something that should make every single person watching this stop and pay attention. Cause and manner of death. Undetermined. Foul play cannot be ruled out. And there are missing parts of Nolan's body that the independent doctor never received.
Tonight, newly released autopsy results are raising more questions about how Nolan Wells died. An independent exam commissioned by his family's legal team classified the cause and manner of death for the 18-year-old as undetermined pending investigation.
He said based on pathologists identified several limitations during the second autopsy that create barriers to establishing a definitive cause and manner of death for Nolan Xavier Wells.
Tonight, every one of those updates lands, and every one of them changes something. Welcome to True Crime Unraveled on YouTube. If you're watching on Facebook or Instagram, you're on True Crime Unraveled TV. We read every single comment you leave, every theory, every question, every time you share your own story. Keep them coming. You are the reason this channel keeps digging. And if you want to go deeper on cases like this one, behind the scenes breakdowns, early updates, extended analysis, subscribe to this channel and also consider our membership package. For those just joining us, here's where this all started, and we're keeping it brief because there is a lot of ground to cover tonight. On July 4th, 2026, 18-year-old Nolan Xavier Wells went to Horn Island off the Mississippi Gulf Coast with a group of friends to celebrate Independence Day. Horn Island is a remote barrier island, no roads, no buildings, only accessible by boat, and this same group had made this same trip before without incident. Nolan was a college football wide receiver at Southwest Mississippi Community College. His coaches called him a silent leader. His teachers said he was the kind of student you remember years later. His mother, Christine, described him as a peacemaker, someone who could walk into any room and make everyone in it feel seen. He never came home. His friends returned to the mainland that afternoon without him. His phone came back on their boat. His keys ended up at a friend's house. His mother reported him missing just before midnight. And on the morning of July 6th, a National Park Service ranger found his body washed up on the northwestern shore of Horn Island, the same end of the island where he was last seen alive. The official investigation called it an active case with no confirmed foul play. His family called it incomplete. And that is where our last update ended. Now here is what has happened since. On the day of Nolan's funeral, July 20th, his mother Christine sent legal notice to his friends. Not a phone call, not a message, a formal legal notice instructing them to preserve all evidence and delete nothing from their phones. She was burying her son and simultaneously building a legal case. Let that land for a second. But before that notice was even sent, Christine had already gone further. Her attorneys issued subpoenas, court orders to TikTok, Snapchat, Instagram, WhatsApp, Facebook, and the family location app Life 360. And the reason for the Life 360 subpoena specifically is one of the most important details in this entire case. Christine had used Life 360 to track Nolan's phone the night he went missing. But when she compared that location data to what Snapchat was showing for the same device, the two didn't match. Two apps, same phone, same time, different locations. That is not a glitch you scroll past. That is a question that needs a forensic answer. The subpoenas are demanding everything: private messages, deleted posts, GPS data, IP addresses tied to every login and password reset, friend list histories, photos, videos, all of it. This is Christine Wells-Wonsley saying, "If the truth is buried in a server somewhere, I will go get it myself." And those platforms are expected to comply under court-ordered timelines. The family's independent investigators and law enforcement have since agreed to a joint, simultaneous inspection of Nolan's phone, meaning both sides look at the same data pulled the same way at the same time. Legal analysts have called this arrangement highly unusual. It typically doesn't happen without sustained pressure from a family that refused to be quiet.
The anguished parents of Nolan Wells are turning to his social media accounts, hoping they contain clues about his death, and they want the companies behind them to help, because from the moment her son's body was found in the water off the Mississippi Gulf Coast, Christine Wonsley has raised questions about Wells's Snapchat account. And now court records show the mother is requesting messages, photos, videos, and other records from Snapchat, also Instagram, TikTok, and the family tracking app Life 360. She has also sent legal notices to Wells's friends, telling them to expect lawsuits and to erase nothing from their phones. And this morning, one of those friends who was there on Horn Island July 4th is taking legal action of his own against online personalities who he says defamed him by suggesting he's a suspect in Wells's death. Bart Edmiston said it has exposed him and his family to death threats. This case is really becoming increasingly litigious even before the authorities have concluded what happened to Nolan Wells.
Sure, right. The investigation continues.
Ongoing and no timeline for
and the
breakthrough.
family is doing everything it can to get answers.
And if the social media companies comply, maybe there's something in there that contains a clue. No guarantee.
All right, Aaron, thank you for staying on this for us. We appreciate it.
Now the audio. For nearly 2 weeks, the explanation for why the group left Horn Island rested entirely on one source: a Facebook post from the stepmother of one of the boys on that boat. She said the boat was taking on water, that they left around 4:30, and that Nolan chose to stay behind. At the time, none of that could be independently verified. It can be now, at least part of it. ABC News obtained dispatch audio from that afternoon. And on that recording, you can hear someone placing a distress call from the water. The voice says, "Hey, we're at the west tip of Horn and our bilge pump stopped working. We're sinking." The dispatcher asks what they want to do. The caller says, "I want to get this boat unsunk and towed back, yes." He also tells the dispatcher there are 0 adults on board. Nobody here is over the age of 21. That call was recorded in real time, hours before anyone on Earth knew Nolan would go missing. You cannot fabricate a distress call in advance of a disappearance that hasn't happened yet. The mechanical failure was real. That part of the story holds up. GPS records obtained from the Mississippi Department of Marine Resources fill in the rest of the documented timeline. The boat left its dock at 9:56 in the morning. It arrived at Horn Island at 11:14 a.m. For the next 5 hours, that boat barely moved. It was stationary on that island. It departed at 4:31 p.m., moving no faster than 4 knots, suggesting it was being towed. By 5:25, whatever issue they had was resolved because the boat suddenly jumped to 30 to 35 knots and headed home. That is the confirmed, documented timeline.
Hey, we're at the west tip of Horn, and our bilge pump stopped working. We're sinking.
This morning, more audio of the frantic call from the boat Nolan Wells was supposed to have taken to shore after celebrating July 4th with friends on a remote barrier island off the Mississippi Gulf Coast.
And what do you want to do? Do you want to be towed back?
I want to get this boat unsank and towed back, yes.
The caller told the dispatcher everyone aboard was unhurt and noted he and the passengers were young.
There are 0 adults on board. Nobody here is over the age of 21.
Documents obtained by ABC News show that boat set off for Horn Island just before 10 a.m. the morning of July 4th. Wells and his friends arrived at 11:14. For the next 5 hours, the boat was stationary until it left at 4:31 p.m. without Wells, moving at no more than 4 knots. Whatever problem the teens reported was resolved about an hour later at 5:25 when vessel regains normal operation and begins accelerating at 30 to 35 knots. Friends said they did not abandon Wells. Rather, the Mississippi Department of Marine Resources reported his friends saying Wells was in the company of an unknown female and that he chose to remain at the island. As searchers began scanning the island and surrounding waters, this email obtained by ABC News shows the preliminary information they were given, describing Wells as a black male, 6'1", 180 pounds, wearing shorts only. The Marine Patrol listed his alcohol intake as heavy. The state's autopsy, including the results of toxicology tests, is pending.
As long as we continue to remember him, his light will continue to shine through us all. Nolan, we love you. We'll continue to fight for you.
Wells was laid to rest last week. A source tells ABC News on the day of the funeral, his mother sent his friends legal notice to expect a lawsuit, instructing them to preserve evidence and not to delete anything on their phones. Nothing further from the Wells family about those impending lawsuits. Meanwhile, the district attorney has asked for patience in the investigation, saying minimal releases of information are meant to protect the integrity of the case. Officials have provided no timeline for when it will be complete.
The family of Nolan Wells still looking for answers about his death. Now, new audio obtained by CNN captures the moment a teenager on the boat that Wells had been on calls for help, saying their boat is sinking. The call was made on July 4th. Take a listen.
It looks like you're on Horn Island, correct? Are you
Yes,
on
we are
Horn
at Horn Island. Yes.
All right. Is the boat sinking or you have it aground?
We were sinking, yes.
Is it aground is the question?
Oh, we're not aground. We are in
Okay.
17 foot of water. We're in 31 foot of water.
All right. Have to ask. What do you want to do? Do you want to be towed back?
I want to get this boat unsank and towed back, yes.
Wells' body was found on July 6th along the shoreline on Horn Island off the Mississippi coast. The cause and manner of death of the 18-year-old is still undetermined. CNN's senior national correspondent Ryan Young has been following this case, looking into the details, and joins us now. Is it clear, when we listen to this audio, is it clear whether Wells was on the boat at the time of that call for help that the boat was sinking?
Yeah, that is a great question, Sarah. And look, a lot of us are trying to figure that point out. And we believe at this point, no, there's nothing clear about who was actually on the boat at that time. And it's been 25 days since Nolan Wells went missing. So if you remember, just last week, the DA said because of this investigation, she was hoping and telling the other law enforcement agencies working on this case not to talk about this case in the public. But so far, of course, the public wants to hear about the autopsy or whether or not the toxicology results have come back. So far, that has not happened. But this audio does paint a new picture in terms of what was going on that boat as it tried to make its way back to shore. In fact, take a listen to another short clip that we've been able to isolate.
They're in a panic and their boat won't crank.
Yeah, they're in a panic. He's saying the bilge is not keeping up. I asked for Coast Guard. He said no, but he's just really upset on the back end. And, I get it. It's a kid. He just doesn't understand.
Now, Sarah, I want to be clear here. Of course, we know and we are aware that there's audio on the internet that people have been talking about. We have not been able to verify that audio at this point. So there's still a lot of questions about this case and the timeline moving forward so far. And that is the big problem and sort of with this case right now. There's a lot of conversation online that no one can verify, that authorities are not knocking down one after another because of the fact that this investigation so far is closed and people can't really see what's going on in the public with what's being accused, of course, online. The big question here, though, especially for the family, is what actually happened? What have investigators been able to find? What we do know is at this point, when those 911 calls came in, it does look like there was an active search that was going on for Nolan Wells. We know he was found on that following Monday. But since then, in terms of the conversation, the investigation, and how this moves forward, we don't have a lot of those answers, and we understand why people are getting frustrated, especially the family.
Now here's what is not confirmed. What happened in the roughly 90 minutes between the last confirmed sighting of Nolan at 3 p.m. and the boat leaving at 4:31. That gap, that 90-minute window, is where this entire investigation still lives. And as of tonight, not one person on any side of this case has walked through it publicly in detail. There is one more thing the Marine Resources report noted. When investigators were first briefed on Nolan's disappearance, the document listed his alcohol intake as heavy. The state autopsy, including toxicology, is still pending. No official findings have been released. But that detail is in the record, and it matters for everything that comes next. Now the independent autopsy. Ben Crump revealed the findings at the 117th NAACP National Convention in Chicago. The autopsy was performed by Dr. Roger Mitchell, a board-certified forensic pathologist and president of the National Medical Association. It was funded in part by Colin Kaepernick. And the conclusion was this: cause and manner of death, undetermined, pending investigation. And foul play cannot be ruled out. Let's be precise about what that means and what it doesn't. It does not mean Nolan was murdered. It means the evidence examined so far is not sufficient to confirm or eliminate any specific cause. That is a significantly different conclusion from drowning, which is what early official statements had pointed toward. Dr. Mitchell found no fractures, no lacerations on the body, but he did find red discoloration on the back of Nolan's head, which he flagged as needing further investigation. And here's the part that should concern everyone. When Dr. Mitchell received Nolan's body, parts of his throat were missing, already removed by the state during their own examination. That means the independent doctor could not examine the airways, could not determine whether water had entered the lungs, could not assess the neck for injury. He said plainly he cannot rule out injury to the neck as a contributor to death. Crump has since called on Mississippi's medical examiner to allow Dr. Mitchell access to those remaining tissue samples, so both pathologists can compare notes directly. The state autopsy, including toxicology, is still not complete. And until both reports are in, nothing about how Nolan died is settled.
Tonight, newly released autopsy results are raising more questions about how Nolan Wells died. An independent exam commissioned by his family's legal team classified the cause and manner of death for the 18-year-old as undetermined pending investigation.
He's saying based on the examination of the body, he cannot rule out foul play. That is significant.
The forensic pathologist wrote there were no fractures, cuts, or bruises on Nolan's body, but noted red discoloration was found on the back of his head and needs more investigation. The autopsy was performed 4 days after his body was found. The pathologist also writing there were missing parts of the neck.
Have you or he asked anyone for access to those things?
Hopefully that the medical examiner will allow him to come and examine the throat, also to talk about observations that they had, and so they could share information.
It is not unusual for a state medical examiner to keep parts for further evaluation. Former medical examiner Dr. Priya Banerjee reviewed the autopsy report.
I think the best thing we can take away is that there's no identifiable trauma.
The Jackson County Sheriff's Office is still investigating what happened after Nolan went to Horn Island in a boat with friends on July 4th. His body was found 2 days later washed ashore there. Today, the family's attorney noted the doctor was unable to examine the airways and lungs for water to determine drowning. In a recent interview, Warren Hudson says he'd been friends with Nolan since they were kids. Hudson said they frequently went boating and they went to Horn Island with a large group of friends on July 4th.
Everybody's drinking, it's 4th of July. Everyone's just trying to enjoy themselves.
Okay, Aaron Gilchrist joins us now. Aaron, the big question still remains here, and still no toxicology results?
Tom, the family's legal team is still waiting for the toxicology report from the state, and the medical examiner's office tells us today it will share appropriate information when the investigation is complete. Tom?
Okay, Aaron Gilchrist with those new developments.
Here's what that means for the case as a whole. If both autopsies ultimately align, that removes one of the biggest sources of distrust driving this family's independent investigation. If they diverge sharply, that divergence itself becomes one of the most significant developments in this entire case. Either way, the answer lives inside those two pending reports, not in anything circulating online right now. Now here's where I need to make my deduction. And I want to be straight with you because this case deserves that. There are two families at the center of this story, and both of them are carrying real weight. On one side, Christine and Elmore Wansley are fighting to understand how their son, a strong, athletic 18-year-old, ended up dead on a remote island while the friends he arrived with made it home. They are fighting against a communication gap where law enforcement failed to send them the incident report they were legally entitled to within 72 hours. They are fighting against missing data on their son's phone, against location apps that don't match, against an independent autopsy that couldn't examine critical anatomy because the state had already removed it. These are not small things. These are documented, verifiable concerns. On the other side, a family whose son was on that boat has a stepmother who is a sitting judge, Ashley Cole, who came back onto social media to tell their side publicly. She said the boat was taking on water. She said her stepson last saw Nolan at 3 p.m. She said Nolan made his own choice to stay. And that specific detail, the bilge pump, the 4:30 departure, has since been independently corroborated by both the dispatch audio and the GPS data. That part of their account checks out. And any honest accounting of this case has to say so directly. But here's the question that still doesn't have an answer. If Nolan told Katie you planned to catch a ride back with his friends, and she assumed he followed through because that's what he told her, and his friends say he told them he was staying, both of those things can technically be true at different moments. Which means the real mystery isn't what Nolan intended. It's what happened between that intention and whatever came next. Why was his phone on that boat and not on his person? Why did his keys end up at a friend's house while his body was on an island? Why did it take almost 7 hours after leaving the island for anyone to contact his mother? And when they did, it wasn't to hand her the phone. It was her own tracking app that led her to it. Why? After his father went to that house that night, did someone initially say they didn't have his keys, only for the keys to be found there anyway, with police assistance? None of these questions automatically means someone committed a crime, but every single one of them requires an answer, not a social media post, an answer, under oath, with evidence. Now I need to say something directly, and I am not going to soften it. Nolan's parents have been receiving anonymous hate mail, threatening messages, while they were planning their 18-year-old son's funeral. AI-generated fake videos of Christine herself have been spreading online. Fabricated footage of a grieving mother, built to deceive, circulating while she sat through press conferences and fought for a police report she was legally owed. Judge Ashley Cole has said her family received death threats. Nolan's friend Trayston Shepard has said he and others have been threatened online. The FBI has confirmed it is addressing interstate threats connected to this case. These are not rumors. These are named people describing specific experiences, serious enough to draw federal attention. We are going to say this clearly on this channel. Threatening any person connected to this case is a crime. It doesn't matter which side of the story you are on. It doesn't matter how strongly you feel. Grief does not give anyone permission to terrorize a teenager, a parent, a judge, or anyone else. And threats don't just hurt the people who receive them. They poison the entire investigation. Every witness watching people get threatened for coming forward has a reason to stay quiet. And the last thing this case needs is more silence. We stand against it. Completely. Without exception. Now, we are going to hear from Christine herself. This is her voice, her words. And before we round up, I want you to listen to every single word she says, because this is what fighting for your child looks like. That woman buried her son, and she is still standing, still fighting, still saying, be like Nolan, be the light. If you were on the jury right now with the GPS data, the dispatch audio, the independent autopsy, the subpoenas, and that 90-minute gap that nobody has explained, would the evidence as it stands today be enough for you to say beyond a reasonable doubt what happened to Nolan Wells on Horn Island? Drop your verdict in the comments. Tell me where you land. And ask yourself this. If both autopsies come back with completely different conclusions, one says drowning, one says undetermined with possible neck injury, what happens to this case then? Like this video. Share it. Subscribe to True Crime Unraveled on YouTube. Follow True Crime Unraveled TV on Facebook and Instagram if you want to be the first to get every update on this case the moment it drops. Also consider our membership package. Nolan Wells was 18 years old. His family is still fighting for him. And we are not going anywhere until there are answers. This is True Crime Unraveled. We'll see you on the next update.
First of all, I want to say thank you, everyone, for being here. This is not how I wanted the world to meet my son, but here we are. So, as you know, I'm Christine Wells-Wonsley. I am Nolan Wells' mom. And Nolan is the kindest soul. He never met a stranger. He loved everybody. He didn't care if you were black, white, purple, green, looked like a marshmallow. Like, he just wanted everyone to be in peace with one another. He loved life, and God gave him this big heart, which always scared us. Me and his dad had conversations with him all the time, not just about the importance of understanding our history as Black people, but also the importance of how you have to move in certain spaces. And it's not us being, feeding into racism or the stereotypes that comes with that. Unfortunately, that is just a matter of fact. There have been many cases, many instances that shows it's unfortunately a pattern that he did not like. He did not like that there was so much division, and I think that's why God gave him us. He was really a peacemaker. He wanted, like I said, everyone to be included. He never wanted to leave anyone out. He just, even at a young age, I don't know, he was, how old was he?
18?
No, not 18. When he was a baby, he did a little dance. So his father and I were having a moment, and as couples do, and even in that moment, he runs in the room with his diaper on, of course, and he starts dancing, because it was like he could feel the tension. He could feel that something wasn't right. So he was just a special kid. Like, he was a special kid, but again, just heart was so big. And we're gonna miss him dearly. But we are grateful, especially to our friend Tashima, who actually was one of the people who helped us that night. She went and picked up his cell phone from where it was, and then provided that to us, because we of course contacted authorities to figure out who to do the report with, whether it was the county or the city, which then turned into DMR, who I contacted immediately from there. And but
can you tell them how you got the cell phone?
So our friend actually, when I called her, Nolan is best friends with her two sons, Jalen and Javon. When I called her, I said, Tashima, have you seen Nolan? He's missing. No one has seen him. No one has talked to him. The boys were actually with her sons. So they opened up their Snapchat, because a lot of the kids do have their locations where they're tracking one another. So one of the boys says, well, it's showing that, I can't exactly remember what his location was showing, but my Life 360 location was showing something completely different. It was actually showing that his phone was like he was on land. And so we ended up, she received the phone from that parent, and then we met up where his car was, which was at a separate location. There were issues obtaining the key, but even so, there's just a lot of...
Tell them about what happened with the key.
So I'm gonna let my husband tell you about that, because he actually went up to the door to get the key, because at that point, I was just not in my right mind. This has just been an awful situation, just terrible.